So continuing on from what we started on last time, we identified that we have goals that we want to set, and some of us, many of us, all of us in fact, want to get closer to Allah in this month. And one of the things that we can do to get closeness to God is to know God. And how do we know God? By being self-aware. So inshallah, in this talk we'll allude to this, we'll touch on this topic of self-awareness. We have, again, if you want to join in on slido.com, and the hashtag is Ramadan, and we can hopefully have some interaction and learn from each other. So, without going any further, we'll need to reflect first of all on the notion of Tawheed. But before doing that, we look at Surah 30 verse 30, where Allah talks about being in your natural disposition. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. Set your heart as a person of pure faith on this religion. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. The fitrah, the original nature endowed by Allah, according to which He originated mankind. This fitrah that we have, right? Allah talks about this fitrah, this natural self that we have. We have this authentic self within us that sometimes over time gets covered. We tend to forget our natural disposition. We tend to be inauthentic at times because of certain circumstances that we are faced with. We know intuitively that what we're doing sometimes is wrong, and we need to do it in another way. So this conscience that we have, right, this fitrah that we have, sometimes gives us a sign, gives us a signal that this what we're doing, we need to do something else, or we need to do we need to say something, for example. Now, if we don't listen to this conscience, it becomes quieter and quieter. The more we listen to the conscience, the louder it becomes, the more aware we become, the more in tune we become with the divine reality. Before going into that, it's worth reflecting about the oneness of God. You see, when the Quran mentions a lot about being truthful, يَوْمَ يَنْفَعُ الصَّادِقِينَ صِدْقَهُم. The day when those who are truthful, their truth will be a reward to them. They will be rewarded by their truth. They will benefit from their truth. And truth doesn't just mean speaking truth to someone else. The biggest truth that we can speak to is our own self. Being authentic with ourselves. Being, we know that sometimes we need to do something, we need to be truthful to ourselves. And that is the real truth. But first, to understand that truth, we need to understand the real truth, the one truth, al-haq, i.e. God. We need to understand what Tawheed is. We recite Surah Al-Tawheed every day, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Have we stopped and thought and pondered over At-Tawheed? Have we thought about this surah, what it's talking about? He, Allah, is the one. They came to the Prophet and they started telling him, because they had the idols in the Kaaba, and they would worship the idols, and different tribes would be they would boast about their idols. And the Quran alludes to this, Lat, Manat, Uzza, the different idols. And of course, if you study history, you see how the different regions, the religions around Arabia are influencing the gods. So we have the Romans, for example, their gods, Athena, is, for example, influencing the Arabs' notion of Uzza, for example. So people come to the Prophet and they tell the Prophet that, tell us about your God. Whose son is he? Which lineage does he have? Where does he come from? What is, because they had this notion that God had daughters. Allah reveals this surah. Say He, Allah, is one, Ahad. Now, Ahad as opposed to Wahid. Ahad is that unique oneness, that there is no duality to it. Wahid has ithnain, thalatha, arba. Ahad is that unique oneness. Allahu Samad, He embraces everything. He is flowing in everything. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He neither was He begotten, neither will He beget. As in, He is neither born from anyone, neither will He have any offspring, because they had this notion that God had daughters, the Arabs at the time. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, that there is none equal to Him. And we ask ourselves when we read this, we read this every day, do we stop and think about it? Do we equate others to God? So the question is, how is this surah linked to authenticity? And you feel free to, if you want to say anything, if you don't want to interact on Slido, or if you want to interact on Slido, how is the surah of Ikhlas linked to being authentic? Being authentic within ourselves. Yeah, being truthful within ourselves. Bring individual and not bring like others to fit in. Okay. So ultimately, what we're looking at is the Tawheed of Allah, the oneness of God. And once we recognize that God is that one, and we recognize that everything is from Him, we realize that we shouldn't be worrying about other things that prevent us from being in that natural state, that fitrah. There are many other verses, and I appreciate, before iftar everybody's a bit tired, but there are many other verses that allude to this. In Surah Ankabut, which we will be reciting in the A'mal, and again, it's very important for us to just take some time out, even if it's one verse we reflect upon, but try and reflect on the verses and see how it relates to our life. وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ فَأَنَّى يُؤْفَكُونَ. If you ask them, who created the heavens and the earth and made the sun and the moon subservient, right? Who has made dispose the sun and the moon? لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. They will surely say Allah. Now that's lost in translation. What's happening here? If you see, they don't say يَقُولُونَ Allah. They say لَيَقُولُنَّ Allah. There's a lam and the noon at the end. The lam and the noon is saying definitely. It's like as though spontaneously they are saying with most certainty that Allah is the one who does this. Who is the one who created everything? Definitely it's Allah. So Allah asks them, فَأَنَّى يُؤْفَكُونَ. So where do you stray? Where do they stray? Yu'fakun from that verb is i'tikaf, where you devote yourself to something. So why is it that we're devoting ourselves to someone else? Why is it that when we're in situations we tend to doubt Allah, where we tend to sometimes, we said in Surah Tawheed, لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, that there is none equal to Him. Why is it that in situations we make others equal to Him? Be it in school, be it in work, be it whatever it may be. We say naturally, intuitively, within us, we say Allah is the one who created everything. The verses continue. They say, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ, if you are to ask them, مَنْ نَزَّلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَحْيَا بِهِ الْأَرْضَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَوْتِهَا. Who is the one who sends down from the heavens water and makes the earth alive after it being dead? لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. They will most definitely say Allah. قُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ. Say all praise is to Allah. بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. but most of them do not use their intellect. We know naturally it's Allah. And not only these people that the Prophet is talking to, it's not only relating to them, it's relating to us. They naturally also are saying they were worshipping other gods, but yet they recognize that there is one reality that everything falls to, is under, that is subservient to him. But yet within ourselves, there is a speck that we doubt Allah, or that we equate someone to Allah, or that we see, we at times, if it's in business, we doubt that we'll be able to do something only by pleasing somebody else. We've equated that person, we've exalted that person, we've doubted God in a very subtle way. Allah says we all realize that He is the one who created everything. So why is it that you can again go on to slide.com, or we can interact here. Why is it that in situations we tend to doubt Allah? Why is it? We know, if you were to ask us who created everything, we'll say Allah, but yet in situations we will doubt Allah, be it whether Allah can do something for us, or whether we equate someone equal to Allah. As I mentioned, sometimes we get scared of maybe it's not someone, it's something. We're scared of situations, and that situation plays on our mind such that it prevents us from doing good. It prevents us from remedying the situation, because we think, oh, what will others think of me in that situation? What will, if I were to say this, maybe someone will say something about me. So now we have equated what the others' thoughts are with being God, that overlies our authenticity, which prevents us from being authentic with ourselves. So this brings us to the notion of shirk. And sometimes, to understand a concept, we sometimes try and understand the opposite of that. And not all the time, but sometimes. So if you want to understand darkness, we may want to see light, to just appreciate what darkness is. And that's one way of understanding something. So one of the ways to understand what Tawheed is, to understand what shirk is. And the Quran is replete with verses talking about shirk. The hadith also talks, Luqman alayhi salam, when he is advising his son, there's this lovely portion in the Quran where Luqman talks to his son, and he I've put a question. If you want to answer whilst I'm talking, feel free to do so. Luqman is advising his son, Ya bunayya, O my son, la tushrik billah, do not associate anyone with Allah. In other verses of the Quran, la tushrik billah wa bil walidayni ihsana, it's coupling not associating with God with doing good to our parents. Many other verses that talk about what shirk is, and exalting and telling us not to be mushrik. The hadith of Imam Ali, for example, mentions that shirk is so subtle. It's so subtle, it enters our heart the way a black ant crawls over a dark black rock on a dark night. You don't even know the ant is there. If you go outside, your eyes adjust in the darkness. You can't see outside until your eyes adjust. But if there is no light, your eyes can't even adjust. It creeps in so subtly that we associate others with God. And of course, associating a person or item with God. But that doesn't mean worshipping an idol, right? When you swear on our God, it doesn't mean taking a physical idol. We take sometimes idols within our heart. And it may be a person, it may be a concept. The Quran mentions, اتخذوا رهبانهم أربابا من دون الله, talking about the community at the time of the Prophet. They took their priests, their rabbis, as gods other than Allah. Now it may be, it's not a physical thing, it may be a concept where we suspend our intellect, we stop thinking, we stop doing what is right because of something or someone or some situation or because everybody else is doing something, we tend to want to do something without recognizing what the reality is, without recognizing, even though we know that what is being done may not be the best thing to do, but because everybody else is doing it, we go with the flow. It's much more easier to do that. If you think about it as animals, you know, when one pigeon flies away, all the other pigeons fly away. It's a natural disposition within animals to go with the herd. But as human beings, we have the intellect, and we have the ability to stop and think and recognize that, hold on, the herd is going this way, but that doesn't make it right. We have to stop, take a step back, reflect, and recognize. Now there's this story, and there's a lesson within this story. It's not a real story, but there's a lesson behind it. That in ancient China, there was a stone cutter. He used to cut the stone, and he was an expert in cutting the stone. You know, to build certain buildings, you need to cut stones, bricks, etc. So one day he was cutting stones, and he saw a rich merchant pass by. And he saw that merchant, he saw the wealth he had. He wished, oh, if only I had the wealth this person had. So he got that wealth. After a while, with all this wealth, he sees the king pass by. And the king has even much more wealth and much more power. He says he wishes, if only I was the king. And he became the king. And he has now much more power and much more wealth. Now as he is passing as the king, he is standing, the sun is harshly hitting on his face. So harsh, it's very hot. He says, I'm the king, but the sun has so much power. If only I was the sun. And he became the sun, with his radiating this heat and energy. As he's radiating this heat and energy, he sees that one day that these clouds that cover the entire sky, and his radiation, his light cannot penetrate. And he says, if only I was like these clouds. And he becomes these clouds. As he is the cloud, he sees these strong mountains. Nothing moves it. However much rain it falls, the mountains can't move. He says, if only I was the mountain. And he becomes the mountain. And as he is this big mighty mountain, unmovable, something chips away at him. It's a stone maker. And he says, if only I was that stone maker again. So sometimes, you know, we wish we were something else. We wish we were this, we wish we were that. Specific, particularly in this time of social media, you know, we see all these people with these glitter. You know, we have people with all these cars or buildings or whatever it is. We wish we were that. You have your own nature. You have your own wealth within ourselves. We tend to want to be something else, or we tend to do things for others. Imam Ali says, attributed to Imam Ali, أَتَزْعَمُ أَنَّكَ جُرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِيكَ انْتَوَى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. Do you think you are this small entity, whereas within you an entire universe is spread out? Be yourself. Be uniquely yourself. We all are unique. We all are created in our own disposition, in our own fitrah. You just have to recognize what you are and be yourself. In fact, the Quran alludes to this also. The story of Qarun. You know, Qarun had lots of wealth. So much wealth that it needed many men to carry just the keys to the wealth. And those who wanted, الَّذِينَ يُرِيدُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا, those who wanted this world said, يَا لَيْتَ مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ قَارُونَ. If only we had what Qarun had. But those who are connected, those who realized what the reality is, we're here temporarily. Today we're here, tomorrow we're gone. Have we realized who we are, and are we living our authentic self? You see, it weighs down on us if we were to reflect. If we aren't authentic to ourselves, it weighs down on us like a weight. You know, it affects us physically also. You know, the stress, all these things affect us because we aren't being ourselves. We aren't being true to ourselves. We want to tell somebody something, but whenever we see them, it weighs us down. It affects us. And if we were true to ourselves, say, you know what, I did wrong that day, I'm sorry. That authenticity just lifts a weight. So, thawabullahi akbar. You know, those people who are with Qarun, who realize the reality, they said, look, what is with Allah is greater. So it's something that we need to reflect upon, and the time has come up. Are we authentic with ourselves? So if in these nights we just take some time out and recognize, realize, are we being authentic with ourselves? Is there anything that we need to rectify? Is there anything that we aren't being authentic with? Are we being what someone else wants us to be, what society wants us to be, what friends wants us to be, what family wants us to be? Are we being truly ourselves? Of course, there are situations where many a time children are told by the parents to be in a certain way. And of course, there's a point, there needs to be authentic discussion in that. If the child doesn't want to do that, and the parent wants the child to do something, and this relates to, for example, in careers, for example, the parent wants the child to be in a certain way or get a certain career. The child may not know what they want to do, and hence not only is there reflection for the child, there is reflection for the parent, and it's a whole learning process. It's sometimes very difficult, but it's something that is very necessary. So I'll stop there. If there's any questions, anything that anyone wants to make a note of, feel free to do so. Yeah. 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 So when you realize who God is, you start to be authentic. Yeah, that's one way of going around it. It could also start the other way, where somebody resolves for whatever reason. Let's say he wants to, he is on a self-help course, right? Just wants to be authentic. God is not in the equation. But once they start being authentic, then they start realizing that God is there. So it works both ways. Yeah. So there's some who may start from the angle, death is imminent. We are here temporarily. How can, why are we having this dual life if we have a dual life? Why are we being inauthentic? We're going to die one day, we're going to face God. I need to make a remedy. I need to make rectification. Yeah. It's the conscious fitra.
Whether you're initially a believer or not,
Yeah.
your fitra, if you go by your fitra, it demonstrates what is goodness.
Yes.
That in itself is product.
Definitely.
So it's not, I think it's initially, like you said, if you listen to that fitra, the consciousness, it makes you closer.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then it gets obviously the sound, it doesn't affect you that much when you get away from
Yeah. Yeah.
goodness or whatever.
Yeah. The more aware we are of our conscience, of our fitra, the more we become aligned with God. The more we become aligned with God, the more our fitra starts talking to us louder and louder. So that's how, we think of the prophets and the imams and all these individuals who are receiving revelation and receiving all these guidance. We all have it within us. The prophets were there, brought to us to awaken this within us, to listen to this voice, and that brings us proximate to God. Definitely. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're embarrassed. Why are you embarrassed? If life was good, if Fitla is telling you so. So I think you're not thinking. Fitla is there within, built in you. The baby suckles the milk because the Fitla is there.
We all have it within us.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
The animals run away when you took a stone. How do they know that I'm going to feel the pain?
Yeah.
The Fitla is there.
Fitra is there. And the verse says, Fitrat Allah allati fatara nas alayha. That all of man has it within them. Not just the believer. Everyone has it within
Even
them.
a fly, flies flying.
They all have their own.
It knows that I'm going to get hit.
And every creature has their own fitrah. Yeah.
Sheikh, I've got a good soul, su'al on this. Wahhabis always say, we're not children. That's already off there.
We'll offline inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad.